Well, footage of the moment New South Wales woman Tony Doherty used her shirt to save an old male koala has gone viral. You may have seen these images overnight. The animal was badly burnt in a bushfire on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. It's now in a critical care situation at the Koala Hospital in Port Macquarie. Tony Doherty is on the line from the Koala Hospital, as is Shane Flanagan, who's the clinical director of the hospital. To both of you, a very good morning.
Morning. Oh, good morning.
Tony, let me start with you. You're being described as an absolute Aussie hero. Take us back to the moment. What happened? How did you spot this koala and why did you decide to do what you did?
Well, thanks very much, but I don't feel like a hero. My husband and I were driving along the Oxley Highway, heading east towards Port Macquarie, and just past a little town called Long Flat. And as we came over the crest of a hill, there was a fire on both sides of the road, of the highway, and right on close to the edge of the road. And there was a fire truck which was just taking off, and just happened to be two people from the news there, and speaking with the fireman. And as we pulled up to ask if it would be safe to follow the fire truck through, I saw in front of the car a young koala come out of the flames, and he looked quite really healthy at that time. And then I was really hoping that he'd just come up the road, but all of a sudden he veered across the road and then into the burning bush. It's just a horrific scene. And all I could think of was, to try and help him. And then so I just asked my husband to stop the car, and I just jumped out. And as I ran towards him, his little legs were burning at the back. I just thought, what could I do to catch him, cover him? And I just quickly took off my t-shirt, and managed to reach him before he climbed the tree. He'd already started. And that just sort of put the smoke out, or the flames on his little coat, and grabbed him, and took him back. And it was really good. The others provided the water, and we had a big blanket in the car.
How was he doing when you were holding him in those first moments?
Oh, he was crying. That was really sad, and sort of squealing on the tree. I didn't know that they called out like that, and so. Yes, he was really terribly distressed, because you could see the burns on his little paws, where they actually have like a leather coating on their paws, and you could see that was lifting off. Just that short exposure to the flames was terrible.
Shane Flanagan, I think it's fair to say the reaction to this has been absolutely overwhelming. You've been flooded with donations, but this comes at a time where you're also being flooded by injured koalas. Firstly, how are you doing?
We're all very tired, I hate to say. Tired, yeah.
It must be a very unusual, very overwhelming experience.
We've been through big fire events twice in the past, but not of this magnitude. This is the most we've ever experienced, and it's horrible, but it's also heartwarming how wonderful the public has been.
And this little fella has a name now. He's in critical care at your hospital. Can you give us a status update?
Look, it's early days yet. As you would all know from the Bali bombings, people can seem okay initially, and then they go downhill, and koalas are no different. His burns are quite severe. He's got partial and full thickness burns. He's almost borderline for euthanasia, really, but we're going to give him a burl. We really want to do that, but we don't want him also to suffer. He's under quite strong pain medication at the moment, so that's helping. But for him, we can do everything we possibly can, but it's really up to him and his fighting spirit, which he seems to have.
You called him Ellenborough Lewis, I think?
Yes, named after Tony's grandchild, Lewis, but Ellenborough's the area he actually came from, yeah.
We spoke to you a few weeks ago as these fires were burning, and you did have some pretty serious fears about the impact on the koala population. Have those fears been borne out?
Probably more so. Our estimate of 350 koalas lost in the fires in this area are really quite conservative and more likely that the numbers are much higher. And you add to that the fires in the Taree Manning area, where they've also lost a significant amount of animals, the fires in the northern rivers, which has also taken out a large proportion of the populations. The koalas in New South Wales are actually in dire straits.
Tony, what do you make of the work that Shane and others there at the Koala Hospital are doing?
Oh, it's just fantastic. There's just such a group of dedicated people here, and the facilities are very, very basic that they have to work with for the care that's intensive care that's required. Yes, but it's just we knew straight away that at the Koala Hospital is the place to bring the koala, and I have actually friends who work here, and had quite a bit of an insight into the fabulous care that they're trying to provide, and to support the koalas. There's just nobody else doing such a great job. Fantastic.
Shane, I'm going to let you go, but I know you've started a fundraising campaign, and I think you said to our producers you've somewhat given up on the politicians.
Yes.
Why?
Oh, look, they're all big with words and policies and all this sort of stuff, but in the greater scheme of things, they've done very little. And what's currently happening, I think, has been a big rude awakening, not only in this country but internationally. We are at great risk of losing this species, and the measures they have in place are very poor, and in fact, they encourage removal of vegetation rather than conserve it. Things have got to change. They've got to change, and we're just going to go for the throat now. We've got no choice.
What do you mean, go for the throat?
Oh, there's got to be major changes. There's got to be better protection. We're trying to get the koalas listed as emergency endangered, and we want a moratorium across the state until we can deal with this. Moratorium on removal of habitat until this issue can be mounted. And bear in mind too, there's a lot of other species that live in association with koalas that are also under great threat. It's not just the koala. We're concerned for all the species that live in those environments, and we're just taking out our animals left, right, and centre, and it's got to stop.
Look, appreciate your time this morning. You've got a huge job ahead of you, Shane Flanagan. Thank you very much for your time, and Tony Doherty. I know you don't like being called a hero, but clearly that's what people see you as at the moment. Thank you so much for your time this morning as well.
Thank you.
Well, some sad news. Lewis the koala, whose rescue from a bushfire on the New South Wales mid-north coast made global headlines last week, has been euthanased. The footage of Lewis being plucked from a tree by Tony Doherty, who literally took the shirt off her back to save him, went viral last week.
Oh, he was crying. That was really sad. And you could see the burn on his little paws. They actually have like a leather coating on their paws, and you could see that was lifting off. Just that short exposure to the flames was terrible.
That's Tony Doherty speaking to Breakfast last Thursday. Well, Shane Flanagan is the clinical director of Port Macquarie Koala Hospital, where Lewis was taken for treatment. Welcome back to Breakfast, Shane.
Morning.
Now, you've had a pretty difficult 24 hours at the hospital. How are people at the clinic doing?
Well, it's more than 24 hours. It's been going on for 4 weeks, so everyone's pretty good here. They're all very tired, but we keep on keeping on.
You did say to us last week that Lewis was borderline. Can you explain why euthanasia was the most humane option in this case?
Well, burns more often than not get worse before they get better. But in his case, they just got worse, and we knew a large amount of tissue was going to basically come off and would have ended up down to the bone. So you just can't do that to a wild animal. There's that skin grafts and things like that are just not possible. We can't give him pain relief forever. And he would have ended up quite maimed and disfigured. So the kindest thing to do was to put him to sleep.
I'm sure Lewis wasn't the first koala you've had to euthanase in recent weeks as well.
No, that's correct.
How vulnerable are these animals in these fires?
Incredibly vulnerable. I mean, their strategy for danger is to go higher in the tree. That's how they operate. And in a low-intensity fire, most of the time that's fine. They can get up there and get out of range of the flames. But these fires were so big and so intense that they not only enveloped the canopy, but their flames went up into the sky. So many animals were just cooked. It was just awful.
You said last week that at least 350 koalas have probably been lost around that Port Macquarie area, although you conceded that was probably a conservative figure. Today we're reporting that the number might be as high as 1,000 across New South Wales and Queensland. Does that sort of figure seem correct to you?
I think that's, again, incredibly conservative. If you look at 1.2 million hectares of land in New South Wales alone that's got burnt, and if you had half of that or two-thirds of that as koala habitat, and you do a percentage of how many animals per hectare, 0.06 or something like that, you're going to get double. So it's likely, it's probably double that figure.
And can you give us a sense of what that means for that population in northern New South Wales and Queensland then? Because it's a prime but very endangered population.
Endangered is a word that you can't use at this point in time. They're listed as vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
There's different categories. We're looking to try and get the status of koala in New South Wales changed to emergency endangered, which will change a lot of the development decisions to be made across the state, or at worst even just put a moratorium until we can sort this out. The animals are definitely, without doubt, in dire straits. We don't want to sound gloom and doom and like the boy who cried wolf, but this is exactly what's happening, and the animals will be in very low numbers. There's still 2 or 3 really good populations. The Campbelltown population and the Wingecarribee populations of koalas are now probably the best populations left in our state, and therefore need priority as very important populations to ensure their survival.
Jane, a recent headline in Forbes suggested that the fires had rendered koalas functionally extinct. What's your response to that?
That's a really big statement to make, and probably quite incorrect. Functionally extinct basically means that the animals are in such low numbers that no matter how much breeding happens, that they're never going to build their numbers up to create a population again. There's still enough animals around that this decline can be reversed if it's very, very, very carefully managed, and it's going to take a very long time. So functionally extinct is a big statement to make and highly likely incorrect.
So you're pushing for an emergency endangered listing for koalas.
Yes.
Have you seen any movement on this in terms of your lobbying efforts with the politicians? Are they listening?
It doesn't go to politicians. It goes to government departments, and it's already in train. So let's see how it goes. But something's got to happen. Not only.
Surely it would help to get the politicians on your side to push this through.
Yes, we're doing our best, and that's why we're making this as public as possible, but it's got to be done through the correct channels. It's got to be done following good scientific methodology, because there's no point saying this is what's going to happen unless you've got data to back it up. And
so this is a process that you need to go through. It's going to take some time.
It's going to take time, and it's got to be done following scientific methodology and done properly. And then we will present that to the decision makers and say, here, this is what's got to happen.
So how far away do you think you'll be ready to present that information?
Well, it's not being done by us. It's being done by some scientists, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. That's the goal. Something's got to be done. But bear in mind, koalas, the habitat they occupy, there's many other species that live in association with them, and they've always tend to be found together. So they're in peril as well. The koalas are sort of like the mammal equivalent of the barrier reef, all the species that are going to suffer if the reef goes down. If koalas go down, so do a number of other species, such as greater gliders and yellow-bellied gliders, owls and various tiny marsupials and reptiles. There's lots of species that are suffering just as much as the koala.
As we've talked about, this has obviously been a busy and difficult period for your hospital. Do you have enough resources to care for the injured koalas that you have in care at the moment?
Oh, we have been swamped, and I mean swamped with donations. We've got so much stuff. We've got enough for the next 10 years of fires.
Oh, let's hope we don't have 10 years of fires like this.
No way. We don't want this ever again. But we're running out of room. We're now building enclosures off-site on private properties to try and house some of these animals because we've still got 3 months of summer to go. You know, who knows what's going to happen. And we're also trying to help people in other areas. We're going to be going down and helping the Taree people. They're at their capacity and they need help. And who knows who else may. So we're all in this together.
It's good that you're getting that sort of support. It's a sort of a silver lining on a dark cloud. Thank you for your time today.
No worries. Thank you.
Shane Flanagan is the Clinical Director of the Port Macquarie Koala Hospital.